Corrections and Policing. The estimates under consideration today include Vote 73, Corrections and Policing, Vote 91, Integrated Justice Services, and Vote 3, Justice and Attorney General. This afternoon, for committee members, we have Mr. Kirsch, Mr. Dutremont, Ms. Ross, our member from Kindersley, yeah, Mr. Francis, and Ms. Sarr. Minister, do you have any opening remarks?
I do, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. That's it. I'm done. I am pleased to be here today to provide highlights of the Ministry of Corrections and Policing's 2021 financial plan and to answer any questions. I'm joined by a number of officials from the Ministry today. With me at the table is Dale Larsen, my Deputy Minister of Corrections and Policing. There will be other Ministry officials to introduce or that will be speaking today, and I ask that all of them introduce themselves as they approach the mic. This budget aligns with our government's goals of keeping Saskatchewan strong and supporting the people of this province through the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, the Ministry of Corrections and Policing budget has increased to $419 million, an increase of $14.6 million, or approximately 3.5%. Custody, supervision, rehabilitation services has increased by approximately $5 million from last year to over $186 million this year. Policing and community safety services has increased by over $9 million to nearly $230 million this year. I will now highlight some areas of importance in this year's budget. Our infrastructure investments will increase by nearly $12 million this year, bringing us to a total of over $20 million. This funding will be used to make improvements in our custody facilities. One of the most significant projects we will be undertaking this year is a 427-bed unit expansion at the Saskatoon Correctional Centre. We will also be opening temporary 44-bed units in Regina and Saskatoon to create additional flexibility to manage the corrections population during the pandemic. Saskatoon Correctional Centre will also see the replacement of urban camp as well as major renovations to the admitting area of the facility. We will also be repairing and upgrading our existing infrastructure to ensure it remains secure. This will include $6.85 million for the replacement of locks, fencing, and the installation of contraband reduction equipment. To ensure we are providing offenders with the programming that they need, we will be expanding our Cultural Lodge program to 4 additional facilities throughout the province. This will allow First Nations cultural programming at these facilities to take place year-round. In partnership with our colleagues in the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, we will continue to implement the gang violence reduction strategy. In 2020-21, a further $1.8 million in federal funding will be devoted to this work. This will include the opening of another dedicated substance abuse treatment unit in one of our adult secure custody facilities. We will also continue to make significant investments in our police services. This year, we will provide $8.8 million in additional funding to the RCMP. This money will support important initiatives such as the First Nations Policing Program. Through this funding, the First Nations Policing Program will add an additional 6 officers to First Nations communities across the province. This funding will also provide for contractual increases to the RCMP. The Ministry of Corrections and Policing plays a vital role in our province. We have accomplished much in the last year and will continue to work with our partners in policing and the wider community to create positive outcomes for the people of Saskatchewan. Those are the highlights. Now, I would be pleased to answer any questions about the 2020 plan and budget for the Ministry of Corrections and Policing. Thank you.
We will now begin our consideration of Vote 73, Corrections and Policing, Central Management and Services, Subvote CP01, and it is now time for questions. Ms. Sarr.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for your opening remarks. I have a few questions about some of the increases that you had alluded to in your opening remarks. The first one, there is an increase of just over $5 million in the custody service allocation. Can you explain where that money is going?
For the custody supervision and rehabilitation subvote, it is increased by $5.105 million. $2.424 million is for cost of living salary adjustments. $1.75 million is an increase for the staffing and operating of temporary structures at Regina Correctional Center and Saskatoon Correctional Center. $391,000 increase for the gang violence reduction strategy. $288,000 increase to provide mental health training to correctional officers. $222,000 increase was to transfer some policy positions from the Integrated Justice Services vote. $114,000 increase to correct a budget error from 1920 related to the electronic monitoring coverage. $59,000 increase to transfer positions from the Central Management and Services subvote. $8,000 increase for cost of living salary adjustments for community-based organizations, and this is offset by a $151,000 decrease transferred to accommodation services in the Integrated Justice Services subvote to centralized payment of the new phone system.
Sorry, can you provide some more detail as to this new phone system?
So the new phone system was installed through the Ministry of Central Services. Instead of each program area now was responsible for their SaskTel bill every month, this is now going to be paid through the accommodation services allocation of Integrated Justice Services. It's basically in addition to their rental charges to Central Services.
In the facilities, in the custody facilities?
Throughout all offices, facilities. Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll see this continuously throughout each one. There's going to be a decrease as we centralize all the payments from each allocation into one area.
Okay. What about the mental health training for officers you had mentioned? Can you provide some more detail about that?
Subscriber, ADM for custody services. So we were allocated $288,000 to provide mental health training for our frontline correctional officers. This is, this is something that we have been putting forward as a need for our frontline staff. It's a 2-year period that will give staff training to work in these critical situations that they're dealing with every day. So the investment follows leadership by the government and other frontline areas to support the mental health of its workers. Last year's initiatives had began in the advanced education for post-secondary staff and through the Health Authority, and funds were committed to Saskatchewan paramedics and first responders. And we determined that there was a need for our staff as well in that. We recognize that working in correctional institutions is a high-stress environment, and through their work, corrections officers have a higher degree of probability to be exposed to situations that may cause post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is a 2-year initiative. The ministry intends to develop 12 internal trainers so that we can sustain the training year after year. So it's $288,000. It's going to be spread across 2 years. And right now we are diligently working on putting a training package together that would train approximately 1,000 of our staff.
Will this training be mandatory for new hires or ongoing continuous training? Could you provide some more detail as to when the training would be required, if it is required?
Absolutely, the training is required. It will be embedded within our induction training program for new recruits, and it will be facilitated through the internal trainers that we train up to facilitate to our existing staff. So the end game here and the goal for all of corrections and policing is that our staff, frontline staff, will have the training in mental health and how to deal with our complex needs offenders.
Great. So is your plan, is this year the training the trainers and then the next year is going to be the implementation system wide, or?
So this year we want to do train the trainers and start implementing, and next year continue on with the implementation.
Thank you. I do have some questions about these temporary units in Regina and Saskatoon. I'm guessing, Ms. Scriver, you might be answering these as well, so I'll try and stick to yours. If not, then I'm not saying you have to answer them, but I'm just trying to limit movement for everyone as much as possible, even though it's really difficult. But could you provide some more detail about these temporary 44 beds, these 44 bed units in Regina and Saskatoon?
They are temporary structures at this point. There are 44 beds. There is also a recreational dorm building attached to these areas. These dorms were constructed as a mitigation strategy for COVID and to ensure that we have the social distancing that's required within the correctional facilities. So this will also offer us flex space to manage the offender population. They are to be up and running July now, and so this is going to help us go forward in dealing with the pandemic for waves 2 and waves 3, if that does come to fruition.
So they're not up and running right now, they're in the process of being constructed?
Absolutely, yes.
What level of security are these units intended to house?
Well, these will be, I don't want to say they're going to be fortified, but they will be modified to address the profile of the offenders that we do come into our facilities. So they could, because they are temporary trailers, they would be more of our low-risk offenders.
And are the units set up as single bed or single occupancy or dual occupancy?
Single occupancy, and they have wash bathrooms within the rooms.
Thank you. Minister, you mentioned in your opening remarks that Saskatoon is replacing their urban camp. Can you provide some more information about that?
Hi, Jill Zimmer, Acting Executive Director of Infrastructure. The urban camp replacement is part of the Building a Strong Saskatchewan stimulus package, and that will be $6.145 million over the next 2 fiscal years. So we'll be receiving an allocation this year for the planning, and then next year will be the actual construction of the replacement facility.
How much money is in this budget for the planning?
For the urban camp, pardon me, it's $1.2 million, so there's a program building that's also included in that. So the design is $600,000 for the urban camp kind of living facility, and the program building replacement is $600K for this year, and then next year it's $3.4 million.
I understand you're still in the planning phase of this, but is the goal to have the same types of programming that exists currently in?
The current infrastructure is at the end of its life, so we're replacing it to continue with the program that exists.
House the same number of inmates?
That's the intention at this point.
Okay. And what will be the plan, because there's obviously going to be unless you're building it right next to the current building, you'll have to move those inmates at some point, I'm assuming. What will be the plan for the interim?
Yeah, we're working on that. We've got a few options on how we can manage it, but like I said, we're just in the early stages of planning that.
Do you know how many years you're projecting it will take for this construction?
That it will be complete in the next fiscal year.
Minister, you had mentioned a portion of money dedicated to installing contraband detection in the facilities. Can you provide some more information about that?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, the contraband reduction strategy, it's a multi-year strategy to bring technology into the facilities to reduce the amount of contraband that's coming in. And so there's necessary infrastructure changes that need to occur in order to bring this equipment in.
What equipment is bringing in and what infrastructure changes are needed?
There's body scanners, and because of the radiation and stuff with those, there needs to be like a 3-meter perimeter around those machines. And the current admitting areas in several facilities don't have sufficient space to allow for that, so there needs to be some changes to allow those to be installed.
Will this money allow for body scanners to be installed in every custody facility?
For the current fiscal year, I don't believe, sorry, the contraband reduction for the current fiscal year is for the Pine Grove Correctional Center. So the intention, again, it's a multi-year type of project. So the Saskatoon admitting project is also to allow for that to occur, and then Pine Grove this year as well.
Or will there be any other ones completed this budget year?
Pine Grove is the main one, yeah.
Minister, you also mentioned in your opening remarks that there will be an expansion to the Cultural Lodge program. Could you provide some more detail?
Yes, there are existing cultural lodges in a couple of the facilities, currently at the Paul Dojak and Pine Grove Correctional Centers. So we're expanding that program to Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Regina, and Kilburn Hall.
So can you provide some more detail as to what that's going to look like?
They're not sort of fancy buildings, but they're just basically to allow elders to come in. I actually don't want to speak to the programming aspect. The structures themselves, the infrastructure is just very like one-story building to allow for sweats to occur and items of that nature. As to the programming, I can't speak to that.
Some of them, in some places, they are the elders' lodges are as simple as a mobile home, really. Can you provide some information as to what the infrastructure is going to physically look like? And will it be all seasons? That's another